You're on.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Health meeting on Tuesday, December 21st, 2021 at 10 a.m. I call the meeting to order and all members are present. So, good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. First order of business is public comment. So if you have anything you want to add, please raise your hand. I don't see that. We'll have another public comment before we go into executive session. Okay, vote to approve meeting minutes from 12/7/21. Did everyone get a chance to take a look at those?
Yep.
Any comments?
No, I thought they looked good.
Okay,
Great.
so I will move to accept the 12/7/21 minutes as edited by myself.
I second the motion and vote aye, Sacco.
I vote aye, Medina.
Okay, Malinowski, aye. Thank you. Okay, so we have another appointment to make for the Metro West Tobacco Inspector. And Heather, this is an additional inspector, correct?
Correct. So we have Olivia Dufour from Metro West and the tobacco control. And she performed 20 inspections for us this year. She did 10 sort of pre-inspections and then 10 inspections. And then she did compliance checks with aid of someone else. But in terms of, this is an appointment for another inspector who's housed out of Metro West. And while I have you guys, I wasn't sure, Olivia Dufour, I think we appointed in March 2021, yes. And I didn't know if that was sort of an annual thing, every other or every 3 years. But anyways, we'll think about that in 2022. But right now she wanted us to appoint someone else who works at a Metro West out of Framingham with her.
Okay. Any questions on that?
No.
Oh,
Okay, so I move to appoint Metro West Tobacco Inspector Michelle Casapanta.
Good job.
Second? Anyone?
I
Anyone
second the motion and vote aye.
and I vote aye.
Okay, and Malinowski's aye. So that passes 3-0. Okay, great. Thank you. Last meeting, we discussed the number of tobacco licenses issued by the Southborough Board of Health. And at that time, we were discussing that one of the establishments was not going to renew their tobacco license, which I believe was Bin. And so that was going to bring us from 10 licenses down to 9. And a prior Board of Health, and Nancy, you probably know more about this than I would, but there was discussion around the number of licenses that Southborough wanted to have, and the number was 8. And in going through the documents on the town website related to tobacco licenses on our policies and procedures, it actually doesn't say the number of licenses that we allow in town. And I think it probably should be in that policy so that it's memorialized that this is the number that we have. So that's why I put it back on the agenda, just to officially take a vote on that and ask Barbara to go ahead and update those documents online. In addition to that, though, Safdar, were there other things that you wanted to take a look at related to any guidelines, policy, and procedure that you wanted to update in addition to that?
Yeah, and this was something we can with tobacco. So I sent some documents out to everyone. I don't know if everyone had a chance to review those. There's a lot in those documents about the state level tobacco control with DPH. But again, one is we are allowed to limit our licenses independent of anything else. So I think that we should definitely move forward to limiting that. The second was about the signage, that all the tobacco establishments, and this is where we can work with our inspectors, are required to have those warning signs issued by DPH visible to all their customers. And I don't know if they are, but they're very, very good about warning about the dangers of tobacco, the dangers of e-cigarettes. And the signs are very easily printable and downloadable. They're free from the DPH website. So I don't know, Heather, if you've talked to the tobacco inspectors about those signs at the gas stations and anywhere else that's selling tobacco.
I can check with her. I know she does check signage, but I don't know to what degree.
So those DPH signs have to be visible to all customers.
It's supposed to be, yeah.
And I don't
Okay.
know if they are at the gas stations in particular is where I'm thinking more so than anything else. And so I think, that, and then just making sure that there's are we, and this isn't clear from the state things, and we can take a look at this a little more carefully in terms of storefront advertising. They are not allowed to advertise any kind of tobacco, from my understanding, storefront, are they? Heather, I believe so. And I think I think we have to look at what the gas stations have in terms of what they have on their on their windows for signage as well. So those things definitely.
So Safdar, would you like to take the lead on
Yeah.
Going through our current policies and procedures? And I did go through some 2015 minutes related to tobacco licenses, and Nancy, again, you probably know more about this than I do, but you had someone from MHOA come in and discuss, what the state guidelines are and what we should be looking at the local level. Thinking maybe that it's time that we just kind of revisit that. Because I think it sounds like a lot of legwork, at least from the minutes, was done in making sure that we're following what we should at the local.
Well, I think it might have been, it probably was earlier than that, but I know when they increased the age limit from 18 to 21, we were pretty busy with the signage for that.
Okay.
They were really checking that when that went into play, but it probably hasn't been checked as, vigilantly since. So
right, and I think the signage for vape products has to now include the EVALI, or that lung injury syndrome that happened, and that's where I think, and that just was pre-pandemic. So my guess is that's what we need to start catching up on.
Right.
But I'd be happy to take the lead on that.
Right, there's definitely updates state-wise since 2015.
So. And then I think our big thing is deciding on where we want to cap the licenses. So right now we have our 3 gas stations and then the convenience stores, and so I think, do we cap it? I think 8's reasonable, but what do we do with the 9th establishment? Are we allowed to, or do we have to cap it at?
If they
How can we do this? I guess that's my question.
Close, or I think if they try to, like, a new owner applies for it, that's a tricky one. Yeah.
That's how I remember it, Barbara, that we said as people close or leave, we won't renew.
It's out. Right. So somebody
renew.
bought that. I think they decided that no, they won't get another license. It'll be capped at 8.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we want to be bold and go a little lower given the size of our town?
I'm easy with that. Wouldn't mind. You want to go to 6?
6? Yeah.
So
We
can't close, tell people they can't. I don't think.
No, we're not going to close. But in terms of renewal, like if people start, not reapplying, then, we reduce our cap to 6. I think what it will do is prevent, and I think we just need to be careful, because what we want to do is prevent smoke shops from getting licenses in Southborough. And this is a very effective way. Westboro has 2 smoke shops, very strategically placed. One is very close to Algonquin, but it's in Westboro, and one's right close to their high school. And they have a lot of storefront advertising. And I think that's what we want to try to restrict.
So I'm not opposed to doing the 6 after. I was comfortable going to 8 because I think that's what this board had discussed before.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that I'll put it on for the next agenda to revisit it for 6, but I just want to make sure that we're within our bounds of what we're allowed to do. So I think we just need to do a little bit more homework on that. And
I can do that.
But I'm fine with doing the 8 for now so that we're consistent with what the original intent was. Is that okay with everyone? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I make a motion to allow 8 tobacco licenses to be issued by the Southborough Board of Health, understanding that we currently have 9. And so when someone does not renew the next time, it will not be replaced with a new license.
I second the motion and vote aye, Sacco.
And I vote aye too, with the condition that we may be able to revisit this at our next meeting. And I think that the law, from what I read, was we had autonomy over this, but I can review all that. We can maybe check with town council as well
Okay,
if there's an
Okay.
issue with that going down to 6.
I think that's great. And then Malinowski, aye. Okay, thank you.
And
And then Zaftar,
I just
you're-
want to,
Oh, go ahead.
okay.
Go ahead.
Just to update you from, Olivia did do, like I mentioned, 20 inspections because she did go on like an initial sort of pre-inspection where there wasn't any sort of implication, more like education, and then she went back again. So I think the first time she went, maybe, and they hadn't, I'm not sure when they were done previously, maybe it had been more than a year, but she went this spring. Nobody, everybody had missing signage, but when she went the second time this year, everyone's signage was appropriate, she said. And when she went the first time this year, there was one with flavored products. And then on the second time, no one had flavored products. So she did kind of do like a pre-inspection and then the re-inspection.
And
So
that's been
Heather, is that-
including menthol, right? Oh, sorry, Heather, that's been including menthol, right?
I think so. It's flavor and,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
yeah, but I'm not certain.
Heather, is
Okay.
that, are those reports something that you could share with the board? So maybe, I mean, Zaftar may want to
right.
take a look at the details.
Yeah.
And just
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, I kind of, I had asked her for the individual reports. I'm not sure she was able to do that, but she did do a spreadsheet for me that talks about
Okay.
signage and yeah.
Zaftar, would that be helpful for you to take a quick look at?
Very
and
helpful,
see?
very helpful. And I
Okay.
can look at this to compare each establishment to the state law and requirement. That'd be great. Thank you, Heather.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Perfect. Okay, awesome. Thank you. And I see Diane's here, so I'm going to bring her over for the food and housing discussion.
Right, Diane, and I think she also was going to talk about community fridge. We
Okay.
are looking to add one in for Southborough, and they have done one in Northborough already. Diana's upside down.
I'm
but you
upside
otherwise
down
look
again.
good.
This
I like it.
my IT guy. I might just go off video. This happened the other day and we can't figure out. We thought we had it fixed, so I apologize. So I'm going to turn the video off as not to be distracting, and I will continue with my report.
Love it.
So we had a busy month last month. I'm just going over numbers for the November month for my report. And then I'll talk about what's been going on this month, which you're all pretty well aware of. So last month the month of November, I conducted 19 total routine inspections, including 4 schools, 4 retail establishments, and 10 restaurants. What I'm seeing during these inspections is the need for additional fundamental safety protocol training. And so what I've talked to Heather about is how we can approach this is doing some Zoom classes for our establishments and making them really brief, maybe 15 minutes, and each Zoom class will record and we can post it online on the website, and each one will just be a specific food safety topic. We're seeing a lot of problems with labeling and dating food, which is really important. A lot of problems with temperature management, which is really important. And we're still seeing a lot of problems with general sanitation. So we thought that might be a really nice way to address it. Housing, we received 1 complaint at 97 Woodland, but I have not been able to follow up with that gentleman. I've tried several times. We've left messages. I haven't heard back from that gentleman on that housing to set up that inspection. And then I also helped with the booster and pediatric clinics for for all of the towns in our regional collaboration. So we're making progress there. The month of December has proved a little trickier. Heather and I have spent a lot of time together in establishments. As you're aware, we had some really extreme situations where we did have to temporarily close a couple of establishments. Both of them have been re-inspected and are doing much better. But we are seeing those really, we're seeing a lot of really extreme violations. I've done, to date, the month of December, I've done 6 re-inspections. Now, typically, that's just not a normal situation. So just all the more need for the oversight and for those additional training classes.
Right. I think some of the routine inspections weren't sort of up to date, so it had been a while. So we're going to get back on a regulatory routine inspection cycle to catch folks up.
Yeah, so we are on schedule for this year. We have conducted routine inspections. 45 out of 53 establishments have already been inspected since September 1st. So every establishment in the town of Southborough will have a minimum, excuse me, of 2 inspections, which is the state requirement. Anyone that shows to be problematic will have as many as needed to keep them in compliance.
Thank you, Diane. And just so the board knows, there was an agenda item on this Board of Selectmen's agenda to accept the common VIX, and there were still some outstanding re-inspections that needed to happen. So I did hold that for a week to give Diane an opportunity to go back out and re-inspect, and that's what she referred to, that have now been open. So I just want you to know that I found out about it a few hours before the meeting, so I made the decision to just hold it just to allow time for Diane to do the work that she needed to do. So I just wanted you to know that. Does anybody have any questions for Diane?
No.
Diane, thank you for all your work. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with Heather, and you may be talking about this next, is the community fridge and what information you know about that, because I know that a lot of people in town are very eager to get that project underway.
Yes. If Diane wants to speak to that and kind of things that have been seen in the state and, you know, some suggestions of what we should put in for guidelines and regulations. And they do have one in Northborough.
So I literally just got an email out to Heather right before this started. I mean, minutes before this started.
9:58, yeah.
Yeah, so I apologize. We've been dealing with staff shortages and emergencies throughout our regional collaboration. I've actually been doing a lot of research on this for quite some time because we do have a community fridge in Northborough, and there should be regulations in place in each municipality. So I've been doing research and talking to other community health departments throughout the state who already are hosting them. If Heather wants to send along that information, I put a lot of great links and attachments. Great. So that you can all do your own research. Little background, community fridges started in Europe around 2014 in Germany. Next, moved to UK. So if we're looking for guidance, we're getting that best guidance from the UK. They have great protocols in place. I actually did include one of the attachments are guidelines that have been in place for several years and work. City of Boston has guidelines on community fridges. That's also attached. And then I also attached some information that would pertain to them from Mass General Law. So just really quickly, I am in full support of community fridges. I love, love, love the idea. I've been involved with food pantries for the last 25 years. So this is something that's near and dear to my heart. Food insecurity is a big problem, even in affluent communities like Northborough and Southborough. My major concerns are obviously food safety related. I feel as a board, you should require them to be permitted. This is a no fee permit. And that a person in charge must be assigned. That we're not looking for a person in charge with a food safety manager certification or anything like that. It's a person that would be in charge of checking it regularly to make sure that the food's in date and that the temperatures are staying regulated. What we've seen, especially in Northborough, the door is always being left ajar. People don't close it completely, which is really problematic in maintaining that safe temperature zone. One really inexpensive and easy way to handle this is requiring wireless thermometer that sends an alert. It sends a text or an email alert. They're very inexpensive these days, readily available. You can get them on Amazon. We are requiring that in Northborough. It's an easy fix. That way someone's aware and whoever's closest to the fridge can go and shut the door. The other thing is we definitely do not want to allow raw meats, raw poultry, raw fish, and cooked rice, because those are the biggest safety risks. Another thing, according to Mass General Law and general best practices, we don't want to allow homemade products. I know that there's a lot of great citizens in our community that would love to cook meals and stock that fridge, but we just can't monitor that kind of traffic. Beyond that, I mean, just review, and I'm happy to, give updates as to what's happening in Northborough, but these are the general guidelines that we recommended in Northborough. And we did work with our fire and police department and got their input as well.
Great, thanks, Diane. Safdar and Nancy, anything you want to add? I think we should put this. I think we should review the information, put it on the next agenda, and I think there's some members in the community that we can probably reach out to. I think Pilgrim Church is very interested in this, and maybe loop them into this discussion. But anything else?
Thank you, Diane, for all your hard work with that. That's definitely a lot of research, and it's really, great that we can get this moving forward. And I agree, maybe next meeting we can have some of the other stakeholders, joining in the audience and give us some input, so we can move the project, get the project rolling. Great.
Thank you, Diane, for everything that you've done for the town of Southborough. As we close out the year, I think this was our collaboration with you has been a huge win for the town, and we can't thank you enough for getting education out to all of our food establishments and working with them on making sure we're within compliance and providing safe protocols. So thank you again, and have a great holiday.
Thank you, you all as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next is the director nurse update. So Taylor or Heather, do you want to give an update on the COVID case numbers?
Yep. So our COVID cases continue to climb. Right now we have 44 active cases in Southborough as of this morning, and they just keep coming in all morning. So as of today, we've had 14 new cases so far. So they continue to increase as the morning goes on. With this new variant, I think we're going to see more and more cases.
Okay. And related to that, I did see that a new opportunity from the Metro West Health Foundation was made available. Heather, I don't know if you have any more details around that.
Right. Well, two things. So we have that prior grant, kind of contact tracing grant, remember, because the CTC closed.
Yeah.
And so that we're going in the process to hire an epidemiologist and more nursing hours and to help with contact tracing, but they're not up and running yet, but should be soon. that process is moving along with getting the epi and the kind of a couple part-time nurses through Salmon, I think, that are already identified, but sort of to get them on board for Southborough to help with when we have surge like today. So we don't have that yet, but I really think that'll be in within a couple weeks, hopefully, to get that. So that would be soonest there. I did want to mention also, I think it was in the Globe, about the contact tracing and the state kind of on our calls, making some recommendations about the contact tracing to focus on priority with cluster and with school settings. I will say in our community, most of our cases are probably with families where there's either adults that work in education or medical, or they have children in school or daycare. So I think a high number of our cases are priority. So we are continuing to call everybody at least once, but prioritizing with the school. But it is still we are still contact tracing now. I feel like with the Omicron is here, it's 3 times more transmissible. So I do think there are going to be more cases in the next couple months, more transmissible than Delta. The preliminary data really on severity is hopefully a little bit less, so we can finger cross that way. The state did release yesterday that with fully vaccinated individuals in our state, 97% of them who have breakthrough cases, it is not severe. So they're, so hopefully we are continuing with breakthrough cases, but hopefully not in the severe hospitalized and death category. So I can mention about vaccine too, but what's next on the agenda?
Yeah, go ahead.
And then in terms of the Metro West, right, that's due in January. I did speak with Kristen this morning about it from Northborough, looking to kind of think about that. But like I said, we have kind of our own kind of epi and contact tracers. The epis might help with some clusters, contact tracers. We're looking at that first, and then we'll look at applying for anything Metro West. That was COVID specific. It's due, I think, early to mid-January, and it would come in February. I have some news about clinics, so I'll do that next.
Go ahead, go to clinics. That's
okay,
fine.
go to clinics. So we have our Moderna booster clinic tomorrow. In the senior center, approximately 120 are booked, and we have 20 more slots open as of this morning. So we have the Moderna booster clinic tomorrow. I think that's the last one for 2021. And we are working regionally going forward with clinics. The 5 to 11-year-olds in Southborough are very well vaccinated. Data from a week ago in that age group showed 92% had 1 shot and 75% had 2 shots. And that was prior to, we did a clinic last week, Wednesday. It was in Northborough at their senior center. And I believe we had 40 something 5 to 11-year-olds for Southborough. So that's another group that was vaccinated, first dose last week, and second dose will be early January. So and then Face School invited, they have 20 more spots open for 5 to 11-year-olds. It's posted on our Facebook page. They are vaccinating. Both days are a holiday. They're Mondays. Monday, it's the 27th, the Monday of vacation, and Monday, Martin Luther King Day. So if there are any remaining sort of 5 to 11-year-old looking for the series, I think a lot of ours are already started. But there are opportunities to finish that up for our residents, for the 5 to 11-year-olds. And then Metro West, as you mentioned, it has openings in January for application for COVID money, but they've already given some money to regionally to Hopkinton. So we're looking at Hopkinton, Ashland, and us, and potentially Northborough, holding clinic, potentially Ashland High School, as more regional vaccination, both for boosters, primary series. So potentially something Hopkinton. What'd you say?
Okay, great. Okay. Thanks, Heather, and thank you to Taylor and Heather for all the clinic time and all of the people who have been vaccinating and drawing and greeting and registering people. I think every clinic that I hear about is very positive, whether it's Northborough, Southborough. So I think the residents are very appreciative with the amount of availability that you've been able to provide. So thank you very much for all of that time and effort. I know a lot goes into it in the background too. So thank you. Okay, I'm going to go back to B on the communication option for health department. So Taylor, Heather, and I have been talking about constant contact and what's the best way for us to communicate with the residents. So I'm working with IT on getting a quote for constant contact, and I'm hoping that for this year, that this board will agree to use some of our contracting money, and I can give an update on that in a second, for this year, and then that it would actually reside in IT's budget for FY23, so that it would be a town usage and not just a Board of Health usage. So I'm trying to figure out the best avenue to do that. But I did take a look at the FY22 budget to actual for the consulting line, which is what Dennis is paid out of. And as of December 12th, I think it was 21,000 out of 64,000 was spent. So I think we have a little bit of wiggle room if this board agrees that we can use some of those funds to pay for constant contact to at least get us started in FY22. Any concerns about that from Nancy or Safdar?
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that this will, it sounds like everyone's in agreement that that's a good investment from Heather and Taylor as well. So.
Yes. Okay. So I'll continue to work with Heather and Taylor on that and with IT to see how quickly we can get going on that. And if it's not a reasonable amount of money, I'll come back. But I'm hoping that it's a few $100s.
Okay.
Okay. And then Heather, do you just want to give an update on the annual report?
So the annual report, I don't know if folks saw that for last year. We're just wrapping up doing the annual report for this year. The request has been sort of 1 to maybe 2 pages, so maybe a little bit shorter than last year. So I did do a draft that does have narrative, which certainly can be used for other purposes for explanation for some of what we're doing. So I discussed our transitions in the narrative, some initiatives and highlights for the year. And then I put our numbers to date on the clinics, inspections, communicable disease, kind of, put some charts in. So just wrapping that up and sending it to town this week to go in the annual report.
Thank you. And thank you for doing that. You did a nice job with it. Okay. And go ahead. Sorry.
Echo. Thank you, Heather. Thank you.
Regular meetings, 111, 28, and 38. So I just put those on there just to remind ourselves when we're meeting. So maybe we can have the community fridge come in. I'll try to coordinate that for the 11th. Okay. I am going to bring in Kate Federoff, who is town labor council now. And she is new as of, I think, September. So she was not involved in any of the previous contracts. Good morning, Kate.
Good morning.
And
Morning.
welcome. So I'm just going, so this portion will be an open session. And this is to purely talk about the differences between an SAP salary administration plan employee versus an employment contract. So this is for the board and the public and the staff to hear kind of any facts related to those two options. We're not going to talk about any specific contracts that currently exist or that could exist, but this is purely fact factual information. And then the board will be going into executive session to discuss any specifics around what we currently have and any any deliberation that needs to happen after this discussion. So so if we can just stick to really what SAP is versus contracts. So Kate, I'll let you kind of start.
Okay, fantastic. So, really, I think it's important to delve into the history so you understand the basis for some of the things that I'll talk about. So in municipal government, all employees used to be under salary administration plans, comp and class plans. It's called different things for different towns. And the reason that is because of the appropriation authority of town meeting. So town meeting decides each and every year whether or not it wants to give you money to fund certain positions. And that's the way they can voice opposition or whatever, or not the opposite, meaning they're super happy with how things are running. So it's a critical function of town government to respect the appropriation authority of town meeting. It became a little bit more problematic when you had positions that you were needing to attract people to that might not have the same longevity as other positions. And it began with the town administrator and the chiefs, fire and police. So what the legislature decided to do was they created a statutory exception, essentially, to the appropriation authority of town meeting. And it allowed towns to enter into multi-year employment contracts. So, like with collective bargaining, once you fund the first year of town meeting, right? Town meeting funds the first year of a collective bargaining agreement. It's funded for all subsequent years, meaning if you settle with firefighters at X dollars and then you settle for a percentage increase, those subsequent years have to be funded. Now, if you can't afford it, say there's an economic crisis, you have to figure out something different, either through negotiation or through the layoff process, right? And so they extended that to essentially the town administrators, managers, executive secretaries, and to the chiefs. And it allows the same kind of benefit for those positions as well. So once the first year of the contract is funded, it's a binding contract for the subsequent next 2 years or whatever the length of the agreement is. For chiefs, it can be longer. So what that means for towns is that you are not legally allowed to have multi-year contracts for positions unless there's a statutory carve out. So right now that includes town accountants, treasurers, collectors, town administrators, the chiefs, and librarians. There are certain other exceptions. So the other complicating factor is you all are a board of health and you operate under a different statutory scheme. So most of town government employees operate under Chapter 41, subject to Chapter 44, which are all the finance laws. But you operate under Chapter 111. And what that does is it gives you the authority to contract with employees. And it allows you to hire either a director or other personnel. It can be clerical staff. So you don't have to go through the Board of Selectmen. You're independent of them in terms of your employment decisions. And in that section, it allows you to set the salary of your employees. So unlike other municipal employees that say work in the treasurer's office or some other department, you, independent of the class and comp plan here at salary administration plan, can set the salary at the level that you think is appropriate, right? And further in that section, it says you can contract with employees. And there's case law that suggests that you can enter into an employment contract. Okay, but the case law, it actually preceded this new statutory idea of creating employment contracts for municipal employees. So that case talks about a 1-year employment agreement. And so given the context of all of those various statutes, what this means is while you can have an employment contract with your employees, it's limited to 1 year of funding. So you can't supersede the jurisdiction of town meeting and have a multi-year contract which is funded for several years. So you have several possibilities. You can either create a 1-year contract, or if you have an idea about levels that you want to see increased and you have confidence that the town meeting will fund it each and every year, you can always make it subject to funding and all kinds of clauses that allow you to back out if funding fails or reduce the salary if funding fails. You can react that way, so you're not bound by the contract. But the employee could not come back and say, you've breached my contract because you didn't have the statutory authority to enter into a multi-year contract, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So, and I'll give you a for example how that plays out. So I had one town where the town meeting decided they wanted to underfund the town manager's line item. And so say they reduced it by $5,000, $10,000, I don't know what it was. At that point, that person's contract had been executed and funded for the first year. So he had a binding contract against the town. So the town had to scurry and find the money elsewhere to fully fund his contract. The Board of Health employees wouldn't have that same backing of statutory authority that allows you to circumvent town meeting appropriation, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So that's the backdrop on contracts versus the salary administration plan. The other piece that you have to be mindful, and I see pretty consistently with boards who have a more finely tailored focus and are not looking at employment generally throughout the town, is you have to be mindful of equity. And why do I say that? Because in Massachusetts, we have the Massachusetts Equal Pay Act, for example. And what that says is you can't make distinctions in salary based on gender, right? And it doesn't specify male versus female. It's just, you can't make a salary determination based at all on gender. And what they look at is whether or not salaries are essentially mirroring each other when they have equal responsibility or similar responsibility. It makes exceptions for things like seniority. If you've been with the town for X years and you have a certain longevity, you might be on a different step, things like that. It makes exceptions for certain caveats. But if you have a job that has a similar level of sophistication, for example, you maybe oversee the same number of employees, or you have a certain degree or level of training that's required, it should mirror, in general terms, the salary of any other similarly situated position, okay? Otherwise, you're thrown completely out of compliance with law. So that's the thing you have to be mindful of when you're not really looking at any other positions in the town. Am I compliant with law? So those are the things that you'll have to balance and decide as a board how you want to proceed.
Thank you, Kate. Nancy or Safdar, do you have any specific questions about what Kate just outlined?
Where do I begin? No,
Right.
I tried to follow it, but it's so confusing, to be quite honest with you, if you don't work in that field. It did shed light on certain things, but I'm still a little confused. I'm not going to lie to you.
Well, I can break it down super simply. You can't have a multi-year contract that's binding on the town for any positions that you hire for. That's the first thing. Multi-year contracts, not allowed, not binding. Okay. Right. And the second thing is compliance with law, you have to look at other positions in the town and see how they're being paid to ensure there's equity. So those are the two fundamental pieces that you should be taking away. And all the other stuff is all the legal mumbo jumbo that you can just put in the back of your head and when you're trying to fall asleep at night.
It wasn't
think
your
of that.
presentation. It's just my brain doesn't really.
And what is exempt versus non-exempt employees?
Okay, so that's actually federal law. So under the Fair Labor Standards Act, which is federal law, it describes who would be an hourly employee and who would be a salaried employee, right? So lawyers, we're generally exempt, right? We can work 100 hours a week and get paid the same salary as if we worked 2 hours a week, okay? And hourly employees are those who you pay based on the work that they do for you on a day-to-day basis.
So is the salaried exempt?
A salaried employee is exempt. Yes, exactly. So, and the way you figure out who's salaried and who's hourly depends upon their sophistication level. It depends upon their position and whether they have managerial oversight and all of that stuff. It's a super complicated analysis, but generally your higher paid, more sophisticated employees are exempt, and your lower paid, more either clerical, laborer, those types of employees are hourly. But be mindful that the federal law really weighs in favor of being hourly. So if you're on the cusp, you may have, so like your general foreman, for example, this is on town side, but on your general foreman who have, supervisory authority, they tell people what to do, they would still be considered hourly, and they're higher paid. Your police officers, higher paid people, they're hourly. And it all has to do with if overtime kicks in, right? And the federal law favors people getting overtime.
Mhm.
Taylor, do you have any specific questions?
Possibly, but I don't know off the top of my head right
Okay.
now.
Okay.
I probably will, honestly,
Okay.
but I just kind of have to process.
I just, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Safdar,
I think I'm in the boat with Taylor. I just need to process a lot of this. I think the bullet points, I've gotten the bullet points, but I definitely want to, look into a little more detail. So, but thank you so much for presenting to us.
So,
You're
okay,
welcome.
one question that I have is contract is a 1-year agreement. So for SAP, what would it?
Yeah, so the same thing for an SAP. The town meeting could decide any given May that they don't want to fund a certain department, right? So think about what's in the news, the defund the police. What the town meeting could do is put a zero that line item out. I'm not suggesting that's what you should do, but I'm saying that was something that was pretty well discussed in the news in the past year. And so the town meeting could decide to zero that out, and then we engage in the layoff process or rejiggering different budgets. But it has the same authority over SAP employees.
So is that something that has to go to town meeting every year? Or is it only if it gets brought up?
So town meeting funds the SAP positions every single year. And what happens generally, I'm not sure how many of you have gone to town meetings, but you present a $36 million budget and there are no questions and it passes through, no problem. And then you have an article on speed limits in town and there's a 2-hour conversation about it.
Yeah.
So generally there isn't much controversy unless there's a new position. For example, new positions are something that engender a lot of conversation, and they say, well, why do we need that position? We were operating fine before, or, thank goodness we have this position because we were struggling to keep our heads above water.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, most things go through pretty smoothly, and I'm not suggesting town meeting they don't tend to throw atomic bombs at you. Something usually is spurring it, but the possibility exists every single May.
Yeah. Okay.
And the way that we do it, how the current moderator does it, is he actually goes through every budget number, and if nobody holds it, then at the end of him going through all the numbers, they pass that all together, and then we go back and do each individual one that was held. So that's generally how it happens. I think maybe once in the last few town meetings, one budget got reduced that I can remember significantly. But that's usually how it happens. I think normally, if something has existed, it doesn't usually cause any holds.
Right.
Usually.
That's my experience too, Chelsea, for sure.
Okay. Yeah. So is it fair to say, Kate, that a contract versus an SAP employee doesn't necessarily take away any protection for the employee? It's truly not having to negotiate every year if you're on the SAP, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's having some sort of guardrails around equity.
Yes. Yeah.
Those are really the two.
That's generally the gist of it. Absolutely.
Okay.
So quick question, Kate. So looking at the SAP as an SAP employee, then when like you said, it's sort of like we present an entire budget that includes that salary, and it goes in there. Are we allowed with an SAP to adjust salaries per year based on inflation and cost of living, things like so? So for example, like if we put in for an SAP for our employees in the Board of Health and it passes, and then next year it goes again, we are allowed to on our own put in a salary increase. Is that correct? And we don't need further approval because it's part of the budget, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you, particular to the Board of Health, so no one else take this as their mantra, but because the Board of Health can set its employees' salaries, you could do so on an annual basis and build in increases. And on top of that, the SAP employees generally get increases on a year-to-year basis, regardless, to just maintain competitive salaries.
So in the SAP, this board would still set our salaries also, or?
The Board of Health would still set the salaries under 111, and you would have to present it, and the Board of Selectmen then presents their budget and they present the SAP, but you as the Board of Health would still be setting the salary because you have independent statutory authority.
So it wouldn't have to go through Personnel Board, Kate?
You might want to follow that process where the Personnel Board blesses it, but I would say if there was a challenge and if there was a disagreement, the Board of Health's decision would prevail.
Okay. Okay. And Safdar, back to your question on the increases every year. So historically, Personnel Board will make a recommendation on increases for SAP employees. And I think I haven't seen a department not take their kind of guidance on that, although it's not, as I understand it, it's not actually listed in the SAP that they are required to do that, but it's kind of just a guideline that most departments do follow. And we historically have followed that with our admin assistant. So, okay. Any other general questions before we go to public comment and then go into executive?
No.
Okay, so I'm going to ask if anybody has a public comment to raise your hand, please. Okay, Mr. Litt.
Well, I'm hoping not to, but you're used to me by now.
Of course.
Well, first, I hope you all enjoy the holidays. I did miss a packet for this meeting. You mentioned a bunch of documents that you were talking about that I couldn't see, so I'd appreciate it in the future if you can find the time to do that. As far as the discussion that was just going on, it seems to me that at least the Southborough SAP sets salary ranges. It gets the entire text of the bylaw gets replaced every year, and it also defines benefits, like education and all the rest of that. So it may be the case, and I'll defer to Kate in terms of the law behind it. But as a practical matter, it seems to me that with the contract, you have more control over benefits and terms of conditions of work for your employees, because the personnel board is going to go off based on what's good for the bulk of the employees in the town, and you may have based on the technical requirements of your job and the interests of your employees, there are things you may want to do that are different. And I think, as you think about this, you want to make sure that should you choose to go the SAP route, you don't delegate to the personnel board, the flexibility and the control you might want to have over, the conditions of work in particular, and the benefits, like professional education and training and that sort of thing. The way the SAP currently works is that the personnel board holds a budget for that, and you apply to the personnel board, and that's where the money sort of has to come from. If you contract, then you can put things in your budget and you can think about it. So I'm not firmly against going to the SAP, but I think there are some significant risks based on my observations of the way the town works. That's my
Thank
2
you.
cents.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point. And this is actually sort of a gray area in the law, right? It hasn't been litigated yet. So alternative benefits. And for example, think of a fire chief's contract or a police chief's contract, which is statutorily authorized, right? So it's super clear you can do many, many different things. But they have different kinds of benefits, and it's order to remain competitive against union personnel. So for example, Quinn, right? Quinn is the education incentive, and you get a certain amount if you have a master's or a bachelor's or whatever, a certain percentage. And if your town offers Quinn to all your union employees who are in the department, and the police chief doesn't get that benefit, it would make him less well paid than, say, a lieutenant or something like that. So that's why for those positions, it's really important and critical. Now, for those positions, if you were to choose a 1-year employment contract or employment contract subject to negotiation, part of the concept under Chapter 44, the finance laws, is to have sort of equity and balance in the benefits. So everyone gets the same longevity. For example, you get $1,000 if you've been there 10 years or something like that. And everyone gets that. It's equal across the board. And that's the piece that's a little bit gray in the law for these kind of not statutorily authorized employment contracts. But we take a more, liberal interpretation and say it's not expressly prohibited. We'll put it that way. Thank you, Mr. Litt.
Anytime.
Anybody else for public comment? Okay, so I am going to ask for, so I'm going to move that the board will be entering into executive session per Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel to include public health nurse, public health director, sanitary inspector, and not to return to open session. Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
Okay. And Nancy?
Aye, yes, aye.
Okay. Medina? Oh, I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Is that muted? Aye.
Okay, and Malinowski is aye. So we are going to go into executive session, and I am going to move everybody out here. So Heather and Taylor, and
Chelsea,
yes,
can you just send me what you just said though? So I can put
yes,
it into the.
it's on the
minutes?
agenda. It's on the
So
agenda.
should we
Oh,
just
never mind.
leave?
Go. You're all set. Okay.
Should we just leave the meeting?
Hold on a second.
All right. Can I take it off of YouTube?
Yes, please. Yeah.
You-
So I'm going to, sorry,
Should we just
Heather, were you
leave?
saying something?
Should we leave the meeting? Should we click
Yes.
leave?
Yes. I was